12 mark question, Edexcel economics. This is going to pop up once in your paper 1, once in your paper 2, and twice in your paper 3, which accounts to 48 marks out of the possible 335 you can pick up, which means this question itself is around 15% of your entire A-level, which shows why you need to refine your technique and practice this question as much as possible, because you do not want to be messing up 15% of your end grade. So, how are the marks allocated for this question? It's 2 knowledge marks, 2 application marks, and this is where the bigger marks are starting to be picked up. So then we have 4 analysis marks, and just like your 10 mark question, you have 4 evaluation marks also. This is a discuss question. Your 12 mark question's command word will always be discuss. And remember, this question yet again is marked in levels, so the examiner is assessing you on the amount of depth you can write. So depth in your analysis, so being step by step in the chain of analysis, like we always say, assume your examiner has no content knowledge, and then depth in evaluation. With regards to paragraph structure, it's quite simple. It's just 2 analysis paragraphs and 2 evaluations, but I wouldn't clump all the evaluation at the end. So the way I do it, so analysis para 1, and then I would evaluate. So this evaluation paragraph is evaluating the analysis paragraph 1, and then I would do another analysis paragraph, so analysis paragraph 2, then an evaluation for that paragraph, so evaluation 2, and that evaluation is evaluating the analysis paragraph 2. So just embed your evaluation, do it throughout your essay, not just clump it at the end. Now, you don't strictly have to follow this, as there are 100% exceptions to this rule. I've seen hundreds of student scripts, and some students will do 2 analysis paragraphs and only 1 evaluation and still pick up full marks. And why is that? Because if we look at the mark breakdown, where there's 4 evaluation marks, if you've written, for example, you've written your analysis paragraph 1 and an evaluation, and you feel that evaluation is really in depth, you feel like you've done enough to pick up all the marks, then 100% I would not write another evaluation paragraph. However, if you're not completely satisfied that you've written in enough depth in the first evaluation paragraph, I'd 100% go on to write a second evaluation paragraph. And this also applies for timing. It totally depends on your timing. If you have some spare time at the end of your 12 mark question and you're deciding whether to do another evaluation paragraph, 100%, if you're within time limits, you might as well secure it, so just write another evaluation point. But if you're running out of time and you feel your first evaluation point was half decent, 100% leave it there, move on to the 15 mark question. Always remember, with regards to timing, be tactical. You do not need to score anywhere near full marks on every single question to get an A star. So remember, if you finish your timing, move on to the next question. Now, there is also another massive exception with regards to 12 markers, and it's all to do with the question wording. Let's have a shot at this 12 mark question. So, rereading the question, using a cost and revenue diagram, discuss the likely impact of rising costs. Now, that is the first hint. Why? If you remember back to your content knowledge, depending on which costs changed is depending on which curve we shift. As remember, if fixed costs change, and what is an example of fixed costs? An example of fixed costs is something like rent. Why is rent an example of fixed costs? Because it does not change with output. But if fixed costs increase, we will only shift our AC curve. Whereas if variable costs increased, we would shift both our MC and our AC curve. And what's an example of variable costs? Something like raw materials. The price of raw materials changes. Since they vary with output, it will be classed as a variable cost. So basically what I'm going to go and do now is search the extract to find out whether the fixed costs are changing or the variable costs are changing, so I know which curve to shift. Before moving to the extract, I want to make sure I'm not wasting any time and I'm actually reading the extracts with intent. So I'm keeping these 2 key terms in mind, so rising costs and on coffee shops profitability. And let's quickly have a scan of the extracts. Greg's aiming for coffee shop experience, that's probably not relevant. Then tough market conditions for coffee shops, that probably is relevant if you're thinking about market conditions. So let's try find what costs have changed. So here it's talking about rising costs, and if you keep reading, so yeah, by 2020, many costs were rising. Staff shortages, meaning rising wages. So that tells me one type of cost which is increasing. Now, wages is a bit of a variable one. I don't mean in terms of variable cost, but it can technically be both a variable cost and fixed cost. Since if we specifically talk about salaries. Salaries is a fixed cost as it does not change with output, but wages is more of a variable cost as you could hire, for example, if you have more demand in your business, you could hire the workers for longer, so it changes with output. So the way I would class wages is a variable cost. So let's start drawing this diagram. Now, the big thing with diagrams I have to mention, because we're doing a video on it, is mistakes. Now, looking through scripts, I've looked through hundreds of scripts, the only real mistakes you see with scripts, usually, is the non-A and A-star students. Why? Because the lower level students don't actually tend to practice diagrams that much. And that's the main thing. You can use all these acronyms, like sometimes I've even taught things like scale, there's axes, there's lots of these different acronyms to make sure you don't mess up on the diagrams. But in A-star students, they do so much diagram practice, which is why they will never mess it up. Because a lot of these students, even though they use these acronyms, under the exam pressure and the exam conditions, they will still mess up their diagrams. But why do the A and A-star students not mess it up? Since a lot of them, and what I advise a lot of my students before exams, especially if you're feeling a bit iffy on diagrams, you're maybe dropping marks here and there because you're incorrectly drawing them. Practice every single one. So what I would do, get a notebook, get an iPad, whatever, and from your memory, try draw every single diagram you know. If you really want, you can have a few prompts with just a diagram name. So for example, the Laffer curve, so you just know which diagrams to draw. But then compare them. So once you're finished, compare them to like your revision notes, compare them to a website to make sure the diagram is correct. And anytime you make a mistake, make sure you note it down, and then you can remember it next time. So you know next time, okay, I didn't label the Laffer curve, I didn't label tax revenue, so I need to label it. And just that constant cycle of making mistakes and improving, which will make, hopefully in the end, you perfecting your diagrams and not dropping any marks. As I know so many examiners, when marking a question, the first thing they're going to look at is the diagram. Why? Because it's the easiest way to see if the student's made a mistake. And if you've made a mistake on a diagram and you're in a 25 mark question, 15 mark question, it's very unlikely you're going to score that top band. So you're limiting yourself straight away. So you really need to make sure, especially if you're aiming for the A and A stars, you need to make sure your diagrams are on lock. Anyway, let's get on with this. So we'd have cost / revenue on here, and then quantity on our y-axis. Okay, so then firstly I'm just going to draw out a normal basically monopoly diagram, so D equals AR. By the way, with diagrams, I always used to do them quite systematically, so I'd always do the same curves at the same time, meaning that it was like almost a routine for me. So this is exactly how I used to do it as well. So AC and then just MC. So this is our normal diagram. Just going to label up the profit maximization point. Where is profit maximization? Where MC equals MR. A cool little tip there is all efficiencies, so productive, allocative, and profit maximization, besides X efficiency, they all start with MC. So of course, productive efficiency being MC equals AC, allocative efficiency being MC equals AR. But yeah, back to this. So profit maximization point, quickly label that up. So that's our super normal profit. And just a quick reminder there, how do we get our box of super normal profit? And then just labeling up these 2 points, or label that Q max, so that's the quantity where we're profit maximizing, then P max, which is the price where we profit maximize. And just a quick reminder there, since some students might not know, how do we get the box of super normal profit? We go from MC equals MR, and we get the Q max quantity, and we go up until we hit our AC curve. And when we hit our average cost curve, we go left, and that is our first line, and then we go up until we hit our AR curve, and that is our second line. That's the box of super normal profit. But back to what the question's asking us. So we need to shift our MC and AC upwards. So what would this look like, and how would we do this? So simply in your exam, make sure you do this nice and big so it's clear to the examiner, and it will be messy, to be honest. But so first thing I would do is just shift the AC up, since it's probably the better one shift. So AC1, and then remember the main rule with MC is that it needs to intersect AC at its lowest point. So make sure that is happening again. So just the lowest point, obviously just being somewhere around there. Does not have to be perfect, but something like that. MC2, and now all you'd have to do is label up the new points, the new profit maximization points. And remember, this is a classic mistake students make here. So now we've shifted our MC curve up. Where do we profit maximize? We profit maximize now where MC2 equals MR, which is this point here. So then we would go up to our AR curve, which would give us the new price, and then when we hit our AR curve, we go left. So this would be, I'm going to label this P max 1. Of course, now I've done it in red because I'm on an iPad, but in the exam it would all be the same colour. And remember, one little tip: even if you do it in a different colour in the exam papers are scanned in black and white. So I would just do it in black and white, so just do it in black, so you know how unclear it is, because if you do it in different colours, it might look really clear to you, but to the examiner, because it's being scanned in black and white, it might actually look really messy. So just do it in black pen, basically. But yeah, P max, and then you go down to find Q max. That's Q max 1. And now, where is our box of supernormal profit? We would go from Q max 1, so our quantity where we're profit maximizing, we would keep going up until we hit our new AC curve, so which is at this point here. Then we would go left from there, which would give us our new box of supernormal profit. Now, basically, and this is the whole thing the question is asking you, which box of supernormal profit is bigger? This original black box of supernormal profit, or this new red box of supernormal profit, which gives you the answer to the question. Due to the rising costs, such as rising wage costs, the rising variable costs, it has led to decreased profitability for coffee shops. Then for your one analysis paragraph for this question is very, very simple. You're just basically explaining what the diagram is showing. You're using a bit of the context of picking up the application marks, showing your content knowledge, showing you know actually what's going on, like what we explained before, variable cost shifting MC and AC upwards. Then just explain the diagram in a step-by-step manner, saying that MC and AC have shifted upwards. This is led to a decreased profitability, which is shown by the decreased box of supernormal profit, and just basically explaining what you've shown on the diagram is all you need to do in that paragraph. So this diagram and then a bit of an analysis paragraph would be your 8 KAA marks boxed off, and then of course for the 12 marker you would have 4 evaluation marks. Now you can evaluate whatever you like, of course, like I always say, try use the context to evaluate, but a quick evaluation point that's just popped into my mind. We were talking about wage costs, so the variable cost that was increasing, it's wage costs, but you could say, however, in evaluation this depends on whether increased wages increases productivity. And why will increased wages lead to increased productivity? As if you think about labour markets, when there's higher wages, there's more incentive to work, and even the smaller things like the opportunity cost of now losing that job is higher. And because the opportunity cost is higher, workers will work harder to maintain that job and keep that job. Thus means, as workers are more productive, we have more revenue per worker, which would outweigh the cost of increasing wages. So the increased revenue per worker, the increased MRP of the worker could outweigh the increased wage costs. So it's a really good argument. And depending on the time and depending how you developed it, like you could develop that point a lot and 100% that would be enough for 4 marks, but it depends on how much time you have as well. And if you don't develop that point as well, you'd probably write a second evaluation point. But that's basically all you would need for the 12 marker. So 8 KA marks picked up here, and then your 4 evaluation, and that's all you need.